So last week we were on lesson 2. The rest of notes for lesson 2 are on the back paper. The notes for lesson 2 are on the back table on the purple paper. There we go. Not the purple. And then the notes for lesson 3 that are mostly filled out are also back there. You say, wait, yep, we're on lesson 4 tonight. There is, Brother Ferguson puts so much in every chapter of this little booklet. I mean, literally, you could take a week or 2 for every heading in every chapter and get about 1.5 to 2 years out of just this one book. There's so much in it. So, if you go through lesson 2 or lesson 3 and you have some questions, don't hesitate to shoot me a text or give me a call. Happy to work with that. On the last page of your notes for lesson 4, and a gentleman by the name of Rick Renner, I edited his stuff down for space. Rick's a Pentecostal guy from Tulsa, Oklahoma originally. Now he's in Russia, but he's got some decent stuff. And what he says about ecclesia is pretty good. Unless you want to learn Greek, and then what I'll say is just read the section on ecclesia in TDNT in Greek and English, and you'll get the same basic point as you will out of these 4 paragraphs. And why we're looking at this is kind of simple. What have you been taught your whole life that the word ecclesia means? The word for church, the Greek word for church, ecclesia. What have you been taught by most preachers and teachers that it means? Oh, I know at least one of your preachers. I guarantee you he did at least 10 sermons on this during his tenure here and quoted the Greek and said it. Because I know Bob Burkard's style of preaching. Ecclesia means the called out. The church is the called out. And technically, that is technically true. But to define the word ecclesia as the called out, when no one in the ancient world used that designation of it, is like saying, what does the word loyalty mean? And you say, the word loyalty means the quality or characteristic of being loyal. Well, you haven't really said much. And so with ecclesia, when people say, well, it means that we're the called out. Well, that's good, but as we're going to look in this lesson, being called out has more to it than just saying we're called to be separate from the world. If someone wants to read the first paragraph of that 4th page, first 1 or 2 paragraphs, that'd be great. And the words ecclesia or ecclesia, it doesn't matter to me because I'm not worried about us getting Greek right tonight.
The Greek word ecclesia dates to the ancient Athens, where ecclesia was used politically, and this was valid when New Testament writers used this word to describe the church. New Testament writers understood ecclesia as had historical, political, and judicial implications. It is no accident that the New Testament depicts ecclesia for the church and its role in God's plan. The strong political implications of ecclesia made plausible the attempted charges of treason against the authors of these New Testament epistles and the church members to whom they wrote.
All right. Remember, that was one of the charges that they would level against the Christians was they had a different king than Caesar. Remember when they accused Jesus, right? And Pilate said, shall I crucify your king? They said, we have no king but Caesar. But later on, they would say that the Christians have a rival king that they're trying to replace Caesar with. And because their assembly was the ecclesia, it gave credence to it. And we'll see why if I get someone to read this third paragraph for us.
In classical Greece, ecclesia denoted an assembly of citizens who were elected and called to participate in a closed assembly in Athens. The elected ones. The functions included drafting laws, judicial cases, actions of state, declarations of war, appointment of officials, public policy, everything necessary for functioning as a city-state in relation to other cities and nations. No parties or fractions were allowed in the ecclesia.
All right. Now, can you imagine if we looked at the church and said, we will set our own laws for how we will conduct our own courts, we will determine, and we'll do that every Sunday when we come together and set the course of action, and it does not depend on the U.S. government. How long till we'd make one of the government watch lists? Not long. And so when the Romans heard ecclesia, because of what it already was in ancient Greece, and because the Christians had a different king, a different ruler, this is why they could say, you know, they're fomenting rebellion, they're a threat to the empire. And so, and I'll read the last paragraph because it's just kind of long. It says, the Holy Spirit inspired writers use ecclesia because it demonstrates the church as a body of individuals who've been called out or called forth and separated for God's purposes. And just as the Athenian ecclesia ruled in governmental arenas, God expects the church to rule by spiritual influence in every arena of society. The mere use of the word ecclesia to depict the church emphatically tells us that it was never God's intention for the church to be a small group of silent, unnoticed people who gathered quietly to discuss religious affairs. This power-packed Greek word tells us God's original intent was for the church to exercise a voice of influence in private and public life. So the concept of the church, translated from ecclesia, is that of a body of believers as called out citizens of heaven who are to apply God's laws in the affairs of the earth, and to be invited to this distinguished body is both an honor and a privilege. And so when you come across the word church, understand these were the thoughts that were behind that word ecclesia when they would see it in the Greek. And you know, some people will say, Brother Brown, I think that's just if I say to someone, independence is worth killing for, independence is worth dying for. Now, to some people, even in America now, to some people that would be an extreme statement. To some people around the world, would they understand why? Right? But we have what's called what? A Declaration of Independence. And, you know, and then we have our Constitution, and we have these concepts. And so when you come to a word that occurs as much as ecclesia, and it's an interesting thing, and as we get later in the lesson, why do we have the name on the marquee out front that we do? Why does it say Church of Christ? Yeah.
The people in there who worship here.
Okay. And what's the verse from Romans 16 that we get the name Church of Christ from? Years ago, they made a bunch of bumper stickers, you know. Like 50% of every Church of Christ, I think, had them. Right? The churches of Christ salute you, Romans 16:16. It's called the Church of God. It's called the Church of the Firstborn. You know, there's numerous designations that go with church of, but always church is the foundational word. It's always the foundational word. So this concept of the church is huge. It's huge. So, thoughts or comments on the meaning of the word ecclesia? Have you ever really thought of the church as being an alternate form of life and government in all aspects of your life? Or is it just something we do for a few hours each week and then we try not to be bad the rest of the week?
Well, that's a good start.
It's a decent start. I won't argue there, brother. But you know, have you ever looked at the thought of, and this is why Paul says, and this is where the church has gone so awry in America. Brother Stephen, if I steal your tractor, I plow your field under, and then I set your tractor on fire. Now everybody in church would say, brother, you need to call the sheriff on Brian. Because they'd say, he committed a criminal act against you. But the Lord says, you take the financial loss, don't go before the Gentiles, but he says, bring it in front of the church. Why? Because if the church orders me something, I'm expected to obey the order of the church, because the church has judicial authority over all its members. But now we've said, well, we'll give all that over to the government of men. And Paul makes the point in 1 Corinthians 6, he says, what, don't you have people qualified to judge among you? Can't you judge some of these issues? And so, church, and we get into the larger scope, is church supposed to be a consuming part of our overall identity? If you understand ecclesia the way that they understood it. Yeah. And here's what the American substitute looks like. Church tries to be everything in a person's life through softball, volleyball, basketball, swim teams, all the stuff, because the church says if they're going to do it in the world, let's offer it through the church. But that's not the concept that they had. And so, to Rome, the church was a threat. And I would say to you, our government doesn't look at the church as a threat, but you know who still sees the church as a threat because he knows the truth? The devil. Because most churches ain't got enough faith to cross the street. It don't matter what denomination. Right? But the devil knows this. All it takes is one church to grab hold of the fire and set that thing back on. And as we used to say, for those of us who are old enough, it's on like Donkey Kong then. You know? And the devil knows it. So ecclesia, this is why the church is a threat. I printed on yours, on question number 2. Feel free to look at it, but if someone will read that middle kind of bold paragraph there. So it asks the question, is there an emphasis on called out in the actual usage of the Greek word? How may this feature of the church be properly established?
You're talking about the paragraph that says the concept of...
Yes, sir.
The concept of being the called out of has little value or purpose until one is able to identify and articulate that which they are called into. The word repentance has a part of aiding our understanding in the word church, since we are called out of the kingdoms of the world and into the kingdom of the eternal. There is a change of citizenship, constitution, identity, purpose, and work into which we are called. It is not enough to come out because we are called out, unless we also adopt the alternate reality of that into which we are called.
Okay. And this, and I love the preacher I grew up under. when I became disillusioned with the church, it was because I was looking for something that called me into more than what the church called me into. The church called me into 3 hours a week and not being bad. And this is just me personally, I reached a point where I just didn't care anymore. The whole culture's bad, so as long as I'm not really bad by the culture, and I'm not too bad by most church people, there's nothing here for me. And that was really what launched me into trying to find something that was big enough to make it worth investing my life into. And when we finally understand that what we're called out of and what we're called into, makes a huge difference. The way that this is established, as we already kind of touched on, the name and identity of the assembly is seen in its designation of belonging to God or to Christ. Romans 16:16, 1 Corinthians 1:2. So, the origin of the church is at the highest level. It's the United States of America. It's the church of God, the church of Christ. The designation separates it from everything else and sets the agenda. Thoughts, comments, or questions on number 2? Okay. Number 3, that's your own homework. Use a concordance. And next week we have some extra concordances. So next week I'll put some concordances on the back table, since most of these each week have something about a concordance. If you don't have a concordance, feel free to take one of the ones that's out. If you do have a concordance, don't take one, just start using the one you got. And if you don't, and I'll say this, if you don't know actually how to use a concordance, give me a shout and I'll sit down, I'll happily show you how to use a concordance. Once you get it, it's real simple, but honestly, some of those concordances are that thick and a little bit intimidating. So, I'll happily show you how to use one. And if you don't want one of the big concordances, because I think I've only got 1 or 2 of the little ones. It's called Cruden's, CRUDEN''S, Cruden's Concordance. It's a good concordance, and it hits the majority of the well-known verses by word. So like for church, it would have Matthew 16:18. I say unto you, Peter, and upon this rock I'll build my church. It would have that one. But it might not have every single occurrence of Paul using the word church. It'll have the main ones so that you can get the bigger picture. All right. Now, number 4, that's how the question was written. Let me ask you, what are some of the images of the church that you've learned in your life in either Bible reading or Bible class or personal devotion? What are some images of the church? Okay, we are the church. And what are some of the designations that he gives us as his church? One of the most common ones that Paul uses, he uses in Romans and he uses in 1 Corinthians. And this should be easy for all of my medical people in this church. Body. The church is a body. Okay? All right. Now, he uses another B word. It's got 5 letters. Bride. Thank you. Thank you.
That's what I was thinking of, and not body.
Well, there you go. You started thinking that because Tommy sat down too, and you were like, I'm glad he's my husband. I'm glad I'm his bride. See? There we go. So, bride. Okay? What's another designation from architecture?
Temple.
Temple. Okay? Temple. All right. What would be an example from agriculture? And this is one of the most common ones. What'd you say?
Harvesters?
Harvesters, okay. Close. Vineyard. Yeah, harvesters in the vineyard. We're the vineyard of the Lord. Okay. As you think about these ideas of these images, body, bride, temple, vineyard, I think it's interesting, only one of them is kind of static. And even that one isn't, because Peter says what? You're living stones. You're living stones. So even the temple, which is kind of static, it's still a living temple. It's made of moving parts, literally. Your next question, and I'm going to just read what he says here because it's pretty good stuff. He says the background of Paul's usage of the church is probably to be found in the Hebrew idea of corporate personality, in which a whole people may be viewed as one, and in which one person may stand for and embody the whole. And if you want some different verses, Deuteronomy 33, the whole chapter, Jeremiah 31 and verse 15, and Hosea 11:1. Did George Bush go to war in Iraq? It is meant to be a trick question. Okay.
He put boots on the ground, but he didn't go
Okay.
to war.
Right? Did Vladimir Putin go to war in Russia? No. Did he go to war in Ukraine?
No.
No. Okay. But what? The one represents the whole. George Bush represents all of America, but any of the boots on the ground represented George Bush. We will stop George Bush and the American imperialists. Now, you trying to stop some kid from Kentucky who's got an M16. He don't know nothing about American imperialism. He's just some dude that they put on a C-130. They dropped him off in the middle of the desert, and they said, these people are going to shoot you if you don't shoot them. And you say, why do you make a point of that? Because, and people do this in a reverse sense. I've been a Miami Dolphin fan pretty much my whole life. Like the Dolphins, the Steelers, the Oakland Raiders. You say they're in Las Vegas. They're the Oakland Raiders. They'll never not be the Oakland Raiders. Okay? I don't know if I ever liked an NFC team. You say, what about the Dallas Cowboys? I don't know if I ever liked an NFC team. And I remember going to Denver Bronco games. And in this sea, back when Denver was the real bright orange, and it was mostly orange and white, their uniforms, I was this little kid decked out in black and silver. Because the one game my dad would take me to all year long would be the Oakland Raider game. And I remember them asking my dad, they'd say, "Jerry, what's wrong with your boy?" And he said, "I don't know. I don't know." And I owned the identity of the Raiders. But you understand, in the middle of Mile High Stadium, the Raiders did not own my identity. Yet people do this with sports, but they don't sometimes do it with their church. That they derive an identity. And where the church is concerned, what's the most common name that we as Christians are known by? And it's a trick question because the answer was in the question. Christians. So the first thing he gives us of his identity is his title as the Anointed One. Then he calls us his body. Then he calls us his bride. Then he calls us his temple. He calls us his vineyard. He's the vine. We're the branches. There is nothing in our identity that is not derived from his identity. He gives us his identity, and so any one of us individually represents the whole, and any of us as a whole represent the one. And this is one of the very few organizations or entities any place on the planet that does that. And that is the church. And so when you understand corporate personality, and this I hadn't looked at this Sunday night when I said that the problem that so many people have with their Christianity is it's all about their personal salvation, their personal faith. But your faith is tied to the faith of Jesus in the Father. Your faith doesn't stand on its own. You may have a personal faith, but your faith doesn't exist outside of the faith of Christ. And it makes it hard because in America, do we actually like having a corporate personality that subsumes our individual identity? No. And this is a challenge that we have. Because in ancient Israel, and you know, as I'm thinking about this, Tommy, I'm thinking about conversations you and I've had when you've been going through the Bible schedule. One of the benefits of Chronicles, right? And I see two sides to this now, brother. Number one, he does know everyone's name, but number two, he limited it to just enough so that we know that he knows who we are individually, but he sees our overall well-being corporately. He knows who you are as an individual, but you're part of something so much bigger than any one of us. So the next time you're reading the list of genealogies, just say, I'm glad he knows them by name, and if he can know that guy with that weird name, he can know my name too, because mine's so much easier.
It's just probably good they weren't their last names.
Oh man, you got that right. You got that right. So when we look at the church as a body, and if I can get someone to read Exodus 12:2, and if I get someone else to read Ezekiel 16:25, someone else to grab Exodus 6:14 and Deuteronomy 33:5.
Exodus 12:1.
Exodus 12:2.
This month shall be the beginning of the months for you. It is to be the first month of the year to you.
And Ezekiel 16:25. Ezekiel 16:25. 16:25.
You built yourself a high place on the top of every street and made your beauty abominable, and you spread your legs to every passerby to multiply your harlotry.
All right. Say, well, that's some graphic language. I don't think we can have that kind of language in church, Brother Brian. All right. Exodus 6:14.
These are the heads of their fathers' houses, the sons of Reuben, firstborn of Israel, were Hanok, Halud, Hezron, Carmi. These are the families of Reuben.
Okay. All right. And then Deuteronomy 33:5. Okay.
And he was king in Jeshurun, when the leaders of the people were gathered, all the tribes of Israel together.
All right.
So that was
Yeah. Okay. And you say, what do all these have to do with the church? True or false, Israel already had a calendar before God brought them out and set them up as a nation. Did Israel already have a calendar? Yeah, it was the Egyptians. And so in Exodus 12, he tells them what? With the Passover begins a new way of reckoning time. What do we have in the New Testament that is like that? And I already gave you a secret answer in the word Passover. Yeah, Lord's Supper. Okay. Now, Ezekiel 16:25. That's a nice graphic passage. Right? Now, here's what we know. Was it everyone who did everything? No. But it was enough of them that the Lord held the whole thing accountable. All right? Exodus 6:14. The families of who? Reuben. As we saw Sunday evening, Paul was of what tribe? Yeah, Benjamin. That's right. He been jamming. Right? Paul been jamming this, Paul been jamming on that. Right? Benjamin, right? Your identity didn't matter. Who mattered? Which patriarch you came from. Okay? And then Deuteronomy 33. Flip back there and look. Right there real quick. Moses commanded law for us, a heritage of the congregation of Jacob. He was king in Jeshurun when the leaders of the people were gathered and all the tribes of Israel together. And this is looking back. We're looking at the Lord here. The Lord was king when all this came. And point being is that he is the source. This is why one of the few things I've ever genuinely argued with any of my teachers in the brotherhood, quit saying that the first day of the week is Sunday. The first day of the week is not Sunday. The first day of the week is the first day of the week. It starts on Saturday at 6 and it ends on Sunday at 6. This is why I don't care if you take communion. If you want to take communion on Wednesday night, fine, you take communion on Wednesday night. So you can't do that, brother. Sure you can, because you're taking communion on the second day of the week every time when you take it at 6:45 when the preacher quits on Sunday night. And I've had them, it's first day of the week is set by the culture. I said, okay, then when we move in church services to Monday? Well, that's not the first day of the week. I said, in America it is. And they said, you're just being obstinate and difficult to get along with. I said, well, that may be. I said, but it doesn't change the truth of what I'm saying. Our source, our identity, our purpose can't be defined by outside things. It has to come from our source. And you say, wait a second, yeah. If Jesus uses a term that was already understood in the first century, and it was understood for a long time, it behooves us, right, to find out. That's like when someone says, well, the Greek word there is Hades, and the Greek concept of Hades, why are you giving me a lesson in Greek mythology? He used the word Hades because Hades was the understood word for the concept of the realm of the dead in the entire Mediterranean. Jesus wasn't saying the gates of the Greek god of the underworld and his dog and Charon and the fairy. No. Okay? But he's the source. He's the source. Ephesians 1:22 and following, if someone will grab that. These will make a little bit more sense. And we're spending more time on body because the body is the single most frequent way that the church is given shape in the New Testament. Ephesians 1:22 through the end of the chapter, which is like one verse.
In whom the whole building being fitted together is growing into a holy temple in the Lord, and who, I'm sorry, is it 1 or 2?
Ephesians 1:22.
1, 2, I'm sorry. And he put all things in subjugation under his feet and gave him the head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all.
All right. Christ is the indispensable part of the church. You say, wait a second. No, Christ is the indispensable part. How long has Christ been the head of the church? Roughly. Give or take 10 years. Yeah, for 2,000 years. Right? He's the indispensable part. As long as the head's intact, this body keeps reduplicating. The cells keep multiplying, it continues to grow and move on. You know? The big toe that you stubbed when you were 7 hasn't been here for a long time. 7 years after you stubbed it, it was gone. Your body switches everything out every 7 years.
Well, how come that regeneration don't feel as good as it did 20 years ago?
The honest answer, for those of us who remember copying machines and ditto machines, when that first carbon goes,
Anything after
Yeah.
that is.
and that's,
Yeah, there you go.
yeah. Okay. Sister Jenny, can I prevail upon you for Romans 12:4 and 5?
Sure.
And Sister Jen, can I prevail upon you for 1 Corinthians 12? And let me narrow it down so it's not the whole chapter for you.
1 Corinthians what?
12. All right. Jenny, Romans 12:4 and 5.
For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function. So we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another.
All right. And then, Jen, if you'll take 12 through 14 of 1 Corinthians 12, please.
For as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also in Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized in one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and have all been made into drink into one Spirit. For in fact the body is not one member, but many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not of the body, it is therefore not of the body.
this ties to what we're saying about corporate identity. And Brother Gene, a year or two ago when he was teaching, your thumb has a tremendous purpose. Your eye has a tremendous purpose. Each one support each other, even though their makeup and composition is very different. You don't want to try and see something with your thumb. And you definitely don't want to try and grab something with your eye. Right? You say, well, that's obvious. And in a not very distant future, we're going to start looking at the spiritual gifts and the different categories. As a corporate body, and I know people don't like corporate, they say church is an organism, not an organization. No, it's both. It's both. It's an organism and an organization. A body is an organization. But as you look at it, even though individual parts have names, come on in. Even though individual parts have names, does any one part have the ability to exist without the rest of it? And so when we look at the church as organization and organism, in the little book 218, 218 is a song of invitation. 218. Come down here, Waylon. Come on. Just come on. Sit by Miss Catherine. Thank you, Waylon. Okay. 218 be the song of invitation. What do we have announcement-wise coming up? Tyler? Do we have anything announcement-wise coming up youth-wise?
Not immediately, no, sir.
Okay. November 12th, last day to bring in for Sack the Pulpit. November 3rd, for money, see Greg or Tom if you just want to go that route. That's the bag this year. It'll be stacked much neater when Tom does it. I just wanted to see how things would fit in it. What else do we have announcement-wise?
This is gonna be a weird question. If anybody's got any of the, the coffee cans that are metal or tin or whatever it is, we need about 4 of them for Boy Scouts. You have some?
Okay. All right. So if you have old school metal coffee cans, Sandy needs about 4 of them for a scout project. So, sit back, dude. Thank you. All right. Yeah, Brother Tommy.
Yeah, I called a couple of days ago to talk with, John McSpadden, but he was sleeping, and I talked to Juanita for a good while, and, he said that basically all he does is, he's up for a while, so he stays up late at night, and then he sleeps some during the day, but he takes dialysis like 4 times a day, I think she told me. And his son was the last possible candidate, did you know this? And that fell through. Not a good candidate.
Yeah. So if you did not hear that, the testing that they did with John's son, the first few hurdles cleared, but the last couple hurdles did not. So as far as John's son being a viable donor, that is no longer an option. Keep John in prayer, but also keep Juanita in prayer. Anytime we have someone that is chronically ill, also remember their caregiver too when you pray for them. Okay. Carmen, do you have a prayer request on you? Nope. Okay. Just a prayer request. Richard came through his surgery, doing reasonably well. Continue to keep him in prayer. All right. Don't have an update from Mary Kent yet, but when we have one, we'll pass that on. Anything else? All right. 218 be the song of encouragement. Sunday morning might be a better time, but Wednesday night I think is probably just as good. I want to say thank you to everybody who's been patient with me over the past couple of months. For those who know vehicles, you never like to go over your GVWR, gross vehicle weight rating. It's not where you want to be. And I know I have not been as charitable as I should have been. I know I have not been as patient as I should have been. I've not been as gentle as I should have been. And for that I apologize. And I ask your forgiveness. I don't know what day it was in the last few days that it just kind of hit me. I'm now past my GVWR. And so, and I just, I appreciate those who've been kind and patient with me, and I apologize to anybody else that I haven't been kind and patient with, and I ask your forgiveness. So, and that is one of the great benefits of the church is to be able to come back together, and when we screw up, to say we screw up, and pray for each other and bless each other.